I'm proud of what's happening on the floor today. It's an anniversary of some things that I want to call to your attention. But the House continues our leadership with a package of strong legislation that sends a clear message that Beijing's crimes against the Uyghur people constitute genocide and must end now. I've said over and over again, if we refuse to act upon or speak out against violations of human rights in countries because of economic reasons, then we lose all moral authority to speak out against human rights violations anywhere. So 73 years ago, this very week, 73 years ago, the world convened the UN Convention on Genocide to condemn and combat this crime of genocide, which the Chinese are engaged in terms of the Uyghurs in China. 20 years ago, China, again, right now, acceded to the World Trade Organization, and that action, the interaction trade-wise, has not been a success. And during the same week, this week, that the inaugural summit for the democracy is launched under President Biden, we salute him for making that a priority at the head of state level, and again, happening at an opportune time for observing human rights. The President has always said the challenge we have is democracy versus autocracy, and again, he is making a decision to highlight that at the highest level. I salute the President on his call this week that there would be no diplomatic presence of the United States in Beijing during the time of the Olympics. Some of us called for that in May. We must support our athletes. That's very important. We're not calling for the boycott, and neither is the president saying no diplomatic presence. We're saying diplomatic boycott. But we cannot proceed if there's nothing wrong with having the Olympics in a country that is engaged in genocide and perpetrating human rights abuses. I don't get it about the Olympic Committee. We had this fight in the early 90s with them when they had crushed people with tanks at Tiananmen Square. And now again. The PRC, the People's Republic of China, is waging a brutal campaign of repression against the Uyghur people and other minorities with mass incarceration, torture, and forced labor. We talked about it last week in this meeting. But these bills, the House is combating this horrific situation and shining a light on Beijing's abuse. I salute Chairman McGovern, who's really been our spiritual leader on human rights, as the chair of the co-chair of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission, as well as co-chair of the chair of the Committee on China. His bill blocking importation of goods made with forced labor by the Uyghur people, that really is our law, that we don't have our workers compete with slave labor in other countries, but this focuses specifically on that. Then we have legislation by Congressman McCall, the ranking member on the Foreign Affairs Committee. His legislation condemns the International Olympic Committee for failing to uphold human rights commitments, and I join him in that. And Representative Jennifer Wexton's resolution condemning the genocide against the Uyghurs by the PRC. Again, if we don't speak up because we have an economic interest, we lose all moral authority. This is Human Rights Day for us. We put all of this together because of the change in schedule for reasons that I mentioned at the beginning of this meeting. At the same time, we're laser focused on continuing to lower cost and fight inflation, including with further action to address the supply chain disruptions. This week, we're passing the Ocean Shipping Reform Act, a bipartisan bill to bolster the Federal Maritime Commission, strengthen the overseas supply chain, and ensure fairness in ocean shipping. This is strongly bipartisan. In fact, the National Retail Federation yesterday wrote, while the bill cannot solve all current supply chain disruption issues, it will go a long way to address some of the core issues that existed well before the COVID-19 pandemic. Again, this is just one of several bills that we will pass that build on the success of the bipartisan infrastructure law. In there are billions of dollars, $17 billion, in fact, for ports and waterways for commerce to run more smoothly. And in the Build Back Better, that's the BIF, and the Build Back Better includes billions to identify and fix disruptions in the supply chain. So we're building back better with more efficient, productive economy with lower prices for the middle class.